Attorney Cory Briggs has launched and then changed an initiative for the June ballot that funds a convention center expansion and boosts tourism. Will Republican Mayor Kevin Faulconer cruise to victory next year? San Diego Democrats appear in disarray. And SeaWorld will fight the Coastal Commission edict that will end its breeding program and doom its popular killer whale shows. I'm Mark Sauer. The KPBS Roundtable starts now. Welcome to our discussion of the top stories of the week. I'm Mark Sauer, and joining me at the KPBS Roundtable today are reporter Joshua Emerson Smith of San Diego City Beat. Hi, Joshua.
Good to be here.
Good to see you back. Tony Perry, San Diego Bureau Chief for the Los Angeles Times. Hi, Tony.
Good to be here.
Great to see you again. And Lori Weisberg, who covers tourism and hospitality for the San Diego Union Tribune. Hi, Lori.
Hello.
All right. Well, that was fast. Just last week, Attorney Cory Briggs announced he was launching a ballot initiative to raise the hotel tax on tourists to fund the expansion of the downtown convention center and possible backup funding for a downtown football stadium. Yesterday, things changed rather dramatically. Lori, this was complicated to begin with.
Yes, it was.
It certainly was. So why don't you start with an overview of the Briggs proposal as we see it right now.
Okay, and even though there were changes, and much of it's really still the same.
Okay.
But it covers multiple issues, as you mentioned. It's promoting, finding money to promote tourism, because he said the hotel room tax surcharge for doing that now is illegal, and so he's finding a different way through this initiative. It's, as you said, also to fund an expansion of the convention center, but not on the waterfront. It has to be off-site. He's been fighting that waterfront expansion. And he also, as you said, puts in a backup plan for downtown, but provides no funding for it. The change that he's promoting is, he said he would give the Mission Valley Stadium an exemption from the California Environmental Quality Act, which is what the city would like to see as well. But he says the state law that allows that kind of exemption and that allows fast-tracking environmental review doesn't allow you to have taxpayer funding. The mayor's office disagrees with that interpretation. He said, yeah, go ahead, you can still go to the ballot and vote on that. But that exemption, on the one hand, would help the Mission Valley Stadium, but on the other hand, the state law, he claims, not his initiative, would prevent the public funding. So it's very confusing, and as I said, it does cover a lot more ground than just a stadium.
All right, and we should note that the original proposal was 28 pages. This new change is 77 pages, an indication right there. The name for this thing, Citizens Plan for the Responsible Management of Major Tourism and Environmental and Entertainment Resources. Let's put that on a bumper sticker. I mean, how do you sell this thing as a ballot proposal?
It's more than a stadium. I'm harkening back to the Petco Park Initiative. Yeah, I know. I think he's trying to say that really the focus, even though there's a number of these issues, the focus really is our resources, our coastal resources, even our man-made resources, and it's all about tourism and what attracts residents and also what attracts tourists. And all of this together will help protect those valuable resources.
Now,
Tony?
You and I have been here since Alonzo Horton arrived. Can you think of a precedent in which a private citizen steps forward with a tax plan, a land use plan, a legal exemption plan, and he steps over all the elected officials? Have we seen this before?
I don't know that we've seen it before, but he also makes the point that he spent 9 months working on this, that he talked to multiple stakeholder groups, and the mayor's office will say we're not participating on this. The city attorney's office will say we're not really participating on this, but he has talked to a number of people. I don't know if he's going to tell us all the stakeholders and policy and elected leaders he's talked to, but he also has been talking to developers like JMI, which has land downtown.
John Moore's group,
which would like to see an off-site expansion, and also likes the idea that this initiative provides some land for parkland in San Diego State University expansion, where Qualcomm is. So it's kind of that something for everybody kind of.
Well, is this kind of the B plan, where if the Chargers move and the whole plan to keep them in Mission Valley just goes up in smoke, that this is kind of the B plan? Now we'll develop that site out in Mission Valley. Now we'll do this stuff and get this convention center down. And we should say that he being Cory Briggs, is suing the city, and that kind of lawsuit goes away with this thing if it's successful. Is that right? Explain that.
Well, now he did have settlement of language for a lawsuit in that initiative. That's one of the changes. He's taken that settlement language out.
Okay.
So they still have
I'm still reading the story from a few days ago.
And now 77 pages. So yeah, so the lawsuit is still going forward. Yes, there could always be a settlement.
Yeah,
it's just not codified in the initiative.
So that's a leverage.
What about the devil theory? That is to say, and I think Scott Sherman, the council member, was quoted as saying something like this, that this is really just to mess up the city's attempt to build in Mission Valley and to keep the Chargers. And what the bottom line here is, this lends credence to the idea that San Diego can't get its act together and things are chaotic here. I mean, is that really what is happening here?
I know that is a theory that I've heard as well. Mark Fabiani can go to the NFL and say, look,
being the Chargers spokesman.
Excuse me.
That's fine. We just need to point that out.
Mark Fabiani with the Chargers could go and say, look, we tried with Mission. We don't want Mission Valley. It doesn't going to work because of all this potential for environmental litigation. Downtown won't work because now there's this initiative that says no public funding, although he has said some good things about this. NFL, as you said, San Diego can't get its act together. You know, this is why we need to move to Los Angeles.
How does the mayor just stand by idly and let this happen? Do you see him going out there and fighting in the trenches to keep people from signing these petitions? Or if it gets to the ballot, leading a campaign against it? Or is he just going to be like a deer in the headlights and do nothing?
That's a good question. I think what we don't know is all the behind-the-scenes maneuvering that's probably going on right now. They're trying to get hotelier support. All the hoteliers are having their attorneys weigh in. So we don't know yet if they're going to. If the hoteliers support it, that could force the mayor's hand. But in order for an initiative like this to survive, even if it makes it onto the ballot, you can't have anybody opposing it. You know how hard it is to get a tax measure.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that for a second here. Just tell us the mechanism. How do you get this proposal actually on the ballot in front of voters?
So he needs to collect about 75,000 signatures. He's going to start that effort in January.
And that's costly.
And that's anywhere from 250,000 to 500,000 to get it on the June ballot. There's the potential that John Moore/JMI could contribute some funding. There's a crowdfunding source right now going on.
That's to pay folks to gather the signatures.
To pay for the signature gatherers. Yeah. And then it would go to the ballot in June, but it calls for an increase in the hotel tax.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a minute here.
Which I did not mention. It goes from 12.5% now to 15.5%.
Well, that's kind of what this is about more than anything else. It seems like the Chargers thing is almost a distraction. Once they're gone, we're going to be talking about something very different when it comes to this ballot initiative, right?
Right, absolutely. That's the point I was making a little earlier, is if the Chargers go, let's assume they're out of the picture now. Now there's all sorts of opportunities in different set of circumstances in Mission Valley to begin with that site, and then the whole expansion downtown and the water fight versus an off-site thing. Let's talk for a minute about that. We've got a couple minutes left on this. That off-site idea, other cities have done it, and Tony, you and I were talking earlier. A lot of people don't like that satellite idea because they don't want to be at the kiddies table.
Indeed, and people who book conventions, nobody wants to book their convention, as you say, in the kiddie table, and then that site itself has problems. The bus district owns some property there, and they have no place to go, and the estimate has been that if you go to build, for example, a football stadium, it'll take several years longer than it would take in Mission Valley. It is not a clear piece of property.
So it gets it off the waterfront, but creates its own set of problems.
Indeed, it does.
Yeah. So, boy, who knows how the dust is going to settle on this whole thing. Talk again about the Chargers. We had that public meeting, and there were in other cities meetings on moving these teams to L.A., San Diego, Oakland, and St. Louis. What's the timetable? When are we going to finally get some definitive answer, at least from the NFL maybe, on if they're going to throw the holy water on the Chargers going?
I mean, we've heard December, January, they might make a decision. I think they're going through the motions of soliciting public input now, but it's obviously all those owners.
So last comment on this.
Real quick, I'm curious, can you just explain a little bit about the funding mechanism for the expansion? Because I feel like that's kind of a big deal here, right? Like Cory Briggs doesn't want public money used to expand this thing, so he's got an alternate plan?
Yeah, so the hoteliers would take a 2% credit from the 15.5% that's collected, and about 2% could go for a convention center expansion. I don't think that wouldn't probably be enough money, though. That would maybe the bulk of it, but it wouldn't be enough money to fund an actual expansion.
Even if they get enough signatures, does the city attorney have to say, hey, this is legal? Could he block it from the ballot by saying, this isn't legal, it runs foul of a state law that says these initiatives have to be about one thing and one thing only? This thing seems to be a menu across the board. So is Jan Goldsmith going to block this thing potentially?
No, he's not saying that, but he could potentially file a lawsuit, or he could challenge it legally. Yeah.
Challenge it, or just say no, and it doesn't get put on a ballot.
That I don't know. That I don't know how the process would work.
If anything is certain, Cory Briggs has stirred up a hornet's nest here, and we're looking forward to further coverage and follow-ups on this. We're going to move on now. It's been more than 2 years since Democrat Bob Filner resigned in disgrace as mayor of San Diego, and his party, despite a significant advantage among registered voters, has yet to recover. Democrats lost the special election for mayor to pro-business moderate Kevin Faulconer and lost their supermajority on city council as well. And now they can't seem to come up with a viable candidate to challenge Faulconer next year, and could even lose their council majority. They do have a candidate, and we'll get to that in a minute. Right. Why don't we start, Joshua, now the party leaders say the primary election process is to blame. I'll have you explain that in a minute, but not everybody's buying that. But start with this advantage I mentioned that the Democrats have in voting and registered voters.
Right. So 39% of registered voters are Democrats. Roughly 29 are declined to staters, and then the rest of them are
a few points below that are Republicans. So you would think that, boy, suddenly this is a Democratic city, a blue city, if you will, and Democrats should have the mayor's office, big majorities in the council.
Yeah, so just to kind of lay out your kind of the common knowledge out there, when it comes to June elections, your primaries, turnout is lower. It tends to favor incumbents and conservatives historically. If it comes to a November election, specifically a presidential election, Democrats have a better shot at that. I mean, one thing that's kind of an X factor here is who are those declined to staters? Conservatives might have more of an advantage than a lot of people realize, because a good handful of those declined to staters are probably voting Republican in a lot of cases.
All right, let's get to those rules that I mentioned at the outset here. The city election rules, it says any candidate for mayor, city council, or city attorney receiving a majority of the votes cast in the primary is declared elected to that office. If no candidate receives a majority of votes, two candidates with the highest number, they have a runoff in the general election, right?
Right.
So how does that change the dynamic here in terms of Faulconer could win it all in the primary?
Right. So no one's really wanted to challenge Faulconer because it looks like it's
no Democrat, that is. Certainly.
No Democrat has really wanted to challenge Faulconer because it looks like he might win outright in June when turnout is a little bit lower and would favor him. So Labor, the Democrats have really wanted Toni Atkins, the Speaker of the Assembly, to run. She's pretty much said no, absolutely not interested in that. And then Todd Gloria was a candidate that they were
council member. He was head of the council temporarily there.
And he's also said no, I'm actually going to try to run to replace Atkins when she terms out at the end of.
Yeah, so the big names have fallen out. Tony, what's going on with the Democrats? Why can't we see somebody of stature, name value, established candidate step forward?
Because this is San Diego. That's why the declined estates are really sort of Republicans, and they're green Republicans is what they are.
Exactly.
And of course, parties don't mean a heck of a lot in San Diego. I mean, we have them, and we quote people as the chairman or chairwoman of them, but they really don't count for much. And indeed, as was said, once Todd Gloria said, no, I'm going for the state assembly, and once Toni Atkins thought she could bump off another Democrat in the state Senate.
Block, yeah.
Yeah, that was kind of it. And so now we get Gretchen Newsom.
Correct, yeah.
Nice lady, hardworking, community activist. She wants to go from being a community activist in the People's Republic of Ocean Beach to the head executive of a $3 billion a year government. That's a bit of a leap, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, well, she also works for IBEW, so she's labor and pretty progressive, a fiery individual who's been around a lot of environmental issues. So she's well known, and like you said, she's served on the town council out in OB. But I think what Gretchen serves to do is shake up a Democratic base or party and labor as well that was kind of just stuck like a deer in headlights. No one knew what to do, and so Gretchen said, let me just throw my hat in the ring and see if that can shake things up. And it seems like done that to a certain
And
extent.
she's run before, not for mayor, but she's.
And I want to get into more of that.
One of her causes was, I want to help people get good pensions and health benefits. Hey, we've done that. They're called public employees, and you may have noticed that there's been a lot of agitation that it's unsustainable. So I really wonder about that as a campaign issue. Frankly.
Well, let's hold your response on that. I do want to get to a bite from her because
Sure.
we have a little bite from this is Gretchen Newsom, this newly announced Democrat for mayor. That is.
Nobody was stepping up to say that they were going to declare for mayor, and somebody needed to step up to carry these values forward. So I felt that I could be that spark and I could have that conversation, and so I declared for mayor.
Now, she has the same last name, of course, as the California Lieutenant Governor Gavin Newsom. She's almost as pretty as he is. Any relation, or do you know?
I don't think so.
Okay.
Long lost cousins, I'm not sure.
That hasn't come up. All right. So what's she talking about there? It's just somebody's got to come forward because there's a vacuum, huh?
Yeah, so basically very broad progressive platform, nothing super specific, but I think the concern was that the Democrats looked foolish not putting anyone up against Kevin Faulconer, which allowed him to basically shift all of his resources at District 1, which is the big swing district on the council coming up. If they can win that, then Kevin Faulconer has a majority to pretty much pass whatever he wants. If Democrats can hold on to it, then we're still at a stalemate.
So what's going on now in District 1? What's the situation there?
Barbara Bree and Joe LaCava are the two Democrats facing off against Ray Ellis, local businessman.
Who's run before.
District, And again, Democrats just trying to push that to November, thinking that, if they can split the vote 3 ways, then they can win that.
Right. What cuts on the council? What is a Republican versus a Democratic issue? What issue splits the two of them?
Well, Republicans definitely vote in lockstep. They vote as a block.
What issue is pending at the city council?
That's a really good question. I mean, Faulconer has been really slow to be aggressive on anything. Maybe to put it mildly, maybe the one thing like kind of lurking in the background would be managed comp. Maybe if they want to manage comp something, although that seems kind of unlikely at this point. But it's hard to say what exactly Faulconer's agenda would be if he controlled the council as well.
All right, Laurie, give you the last question in
I
this
just want to get back to when we were talking about the Democrat registered voters advantage, and I know that decline to state is still that question mark factor.
Yeah.
But have they not been good at getting the vote out? I mean, they've often had labor, which can be very good, organized labor, to help them get out the vote. Why hasn't that worked in their favor in elections?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the post-Filner fallout, right? So Lorena Gonzalez and her team left to go to Sacramento. Now there's a new leadership over at Labor and basically run by Mickey Kasparian. And we're
longtime labor leader
here, and we're just waiting to see if they can start racking up some wins here. Since Faulconer was ousted, we've had just a series of devastating losses, and so the question is, what are they going to do this time around? Are they going to be able to lock in a few W's?
All right, well, we will watch that as we go, and we're going to have to move on. Well, Shamu the killer whale is to SeaWorld what Mickey Mouse is to Disneyland, but a startling decision this month by the California Coastal Commission would mean the end of orca breeding and eventually killer whale shows at the popular theme park on Mission Bay. SeaWorld is now trying to fight back. Tony, start with that ruling by the Coastal Commission. It was about a permit. They wanted to expand, actually, the tanks down there for the whales. Right?
SeaWorld San Diego had gone to the Coastal Commission seeking basically a building permit to expand the tank for the 11 orcas. And the Coastal Commission said, sure, why not? But it also put in a proviso, no bringing them in from other states, no catching them in the wild. They haven't done that in 30 years. But also no captive breeding. Well, it's at that point that the SeaWorld corporate people they said that's a bridge too far, and they're going to litigate. They claim that there was a backstage fight on this even before the commission voted. The lawyers were blazing away. And they say there's nothing in the Coastal Commission Act or federal law that would allow this. On the other side, the Coastal Commission lawyers and the Coastal Commission members disagree, and basically it comes down to a 1966 law, the Animal Welfare Act, and does it allow the Coastal Commission to regulate animals that are no longer in the ocean, but they're captive? We'll see. like all big issues, it's going to court. And certainly we've had our Shamu issues. PETA people for the ethical treatment of animals went to court, federal court here, 2012, and said that orcas deserve protection under the 13th Amendment to the U.S. Constitution, anti-slavery. The federal judge looked at that and said, really? And said, no, this is more serious and more difficult, and we'll see.
So you think the California Supreme Court winds up
well, no, I presume they're going to go to federal court,
okay.
but it may go to state court, I would imagine. They've hired a big-time law firm, and they'll decide where the best way to fight it. Now, in reality, the Shamu show could go on for several decades with the orcas they have. A couple of them are 2 years old.
Oh, okay. And
a couple of others are young teens. Okay. A couple are in their 20s. My goodness, one of them is 51. They live a long time.
Okay.
So we're not talking about the imminent demise
of the
marquee.
Yeah.
But it also gives PETA and other folks a platform to continue fighting this issue that orcas should not be kept in captivity.
Another success, Lori.
I think the bigger issue is, they'll clearly fight this in the court, but is their business model still viable? Their attendance continues to decline. They're down now below 4 million a year, where they used to be above 4 million. Among all the theme parks, most are all up. SeaWorld, San Diego, and Orlando are down. Do they need to go more in the San Diego's in a catch-22. Do they need to go more toward thrill rides? They can't really do that too much in San Diego because they're on leased land that requires their exhibits to be, their attractions to be educational. Next week, SeaWorld's going to release its next earnings, and the week after, the CEO is we're going to finally hear from the CEO of SeaWorld Entertainment what his plan is. So I think their business model is at stake
Attendance
right now.
is down, revenue is down.
And it all goes back to this movie, does it
not? The cost of, or the value of their stock is down. The amount of rent they pay to the city of San Diego, that's city property out there, down. Yeah. Everything is down. They've fought back rather belatedly through social media and such, but it hasn't really blunted the impact of Blackfish.
Yeah, talk about that movie. That was folks who just painted them in the worst possible light.
What is interesting for those of us who've been here is that this issue has been around a long time. This issue of how well or badly the orcas are being treated. This is not a new issue. We've all written voluminously about it, but along a few years ago comes this documentary, which shows
called Blackfish.
Called Blackfish, that is very anti-SeaWorld, claims that they're mistreating the orcas. Okay, but what is even more important is various changes, I think, in media. CNN showed it not just once, but multiple times, and continues to show it. It's also available on YouTube, various social media, Netflix. Twitter and Facebook and Netflix.
So it's not some obscure corner theater, it's out there.
Things have changed.
And then you had corporations kind of severing ties. Southwest Airlines used to have the Dolphins.
That's right.
And I might point out that after the Coastal Commission decided to put this provision, suddenly the local officials, pretty much SeaWorld supporters all, were struck mum. The mayor of the city of San Diego couldn't get him on the horn. Tony Atkins, Speaker Assembly, can't get her to comment. Todd Gloria, running for Assembly, can't get him to comment. A couple of others would comment, but the big three, I would suggest, they're all running scared. I would suggest that they're running scared of PETA.
Well, if you've
this is PETA coming of age as a powerhouse political entity.
And if you've got PETA's success there at SeaWorld, by extension, is the zoo next? There you get a bunch of big animals in captivity.
I don't know about the zoo,
there?
but if you look at the legal decision or the legal advice that the Coastal Commission ratified, there's nothing in there that says we only get to do this when you ask for a building permit. They assert the right to legislate, if you will, the treatment of all the animals at all times. So if they don't like the orca, they ought to take a look at the sea lion show, and will they decide that that's really unacceptable to have them dancing around and all of that. So it's pretty widespread. I don't know that they would go after the zoo. It's a little farther inland, and a lot of the animals are not coastal animals.
Well, you don't have the dancing bear, jumping whale aspect at the zoo and the safari park.
Animals that were once roaming free, no longer roaming free.
So let me ask a quick question. So if this is not really about the viability of SeaWorld, right, because they can survive whether or not these orcas are breeding in captivity, it's more of a chance for people to kind of sound off on their different platforms. Why wouldn't someone like Todd Gloria or Tony Atkins want to come out and
Well, they're all running for
Parade
election.
this.
They're all running scared, like good politicians do. And I think PETA, again, being the major force behind all of this, is becoming the NRA of the environmental movement.
So they're seen as enough radical that you don't necessarily want to get in bed with them right now.
Don't fuss with them. They'll come after you next. I would presume. Now, I can't get any of them to talk. I've been trying for several weeks. So who knows?
Do you think that Atkins and Gloria feel like this is going too far, that they should be allowed to breed in captivity? Who knows?
If I could get them on the telephone and talk to them, I would ask them that.
I see.
Now, there are others. Congressman Peters says we ought to have a court decision. Let's see what they can do, and they can't do. Lori Zaft, the council person, says litigate. This
Well, we are going to have to leave it there. We've run out of time, but we'll see what happens on that court decision and follow up on that. Thank you. Well, that does wrap up another week of stories at the KPBS Roundtable. I'd like to thank my guests, Joshua Emerson Smith of San Diego City Beat, Tony Perry of the Los Angeles Times, and Lori Weisberg of the San Diego Union Tribune. A reminder, all the stories we discussed today are available on our website, kpbs.org. I'm Mark Sauer. Thanks for joining us today on the Roundtable.